Hi guys, welcome back to session 79 of Java Full Stack Made Easy. In this session, we will talk about Spring Boot and REST API. I'll be building a REST API using Spring Boot in this session. So before we directly dive in, how do we do it? Let's talk about what exactly is Spring Boot and why is it so popular and why do we make use of Spring Boot. Let's compare the Spring Boot with normal Spring framework. Let's consider that Spring framework as a raw kitchen where you do have the gas stove and the utensils, but you have to arrange everything by yourself. Same way, if we consider a Spring Boot in the same scenario, if we put Spring Boot, it is like a fully ready kitchen for you where the gas is connected, stove is ready, water, lights, utensils, everything is set, and you just start cooking. That means in terms of Spring Boot, everything is auto configured. What you're gonna do is your main focus will be on just writing the business logic. What Spring Boot does for you, Spring Boot actually starts a server for you automatically because there is embedded Tomcat server available into Spring Boot. Then it handles the configurations for you. That's why I told that Spring Boot is auto configured, and Spring Boot lets you focus on the logic, not the setup. So that's it for the concept of the Spring Boot. So let's dive into the way how do we create a Spring Boot project, how do we set up these things, and how do we create our first REST API. And as long as the REST API is considered, we have already spoken about REST API in details when we were connecting our Angular applications to the REST API, an external API where we didn't had our own API. So in this session, we will be creating our own API, and end of the day, what we can do is we can have our own Angular application, we can have a REST API, and then we can have a database as well, and we can connect all of them together. Okay, so Spring Boot saves our time. It removes unnecessary configuration, so we can write the code directly, right? So let's go ahead and see how do we set up our Spring Boot project and what will be the steps that will be required to create our first Spring Boot project with a REST API in focus. Okay, so the very first thing that I would suggest you is that, so whenever you are creating a Spring Boot project, you go to a start .spring.io. So if you search for that, and you will have a start.spring.io Spring initializer. This is an official Spring uh, website from where you can download your Spring Boot projects. Fine. And this here we have to select what language we are using, and then what is our dependency management tool, whether it is Gridle or it is Groovy or or it is Maven. Okay, so you decide what dependency tool you are using. So in this case, I'm using Java, Maven, and then the Spring Boot version. So I'll be using the latest stable version, that is 3.5.9. And then the next thing is that the artifact ID and the group name has to be given. So as of now, it is com.example. So my artifact ID, I want to give it as a REST hyphen API, which is gonna be my project name as well. And the package name, which is going to be the base package, which obviously is a three-part package name, which we have already discussed in our previous sessions as well. So I will call it as com.example.rest API. Fine. And the kind of packaging I require is the jar type of packaging, and the configurations, again, Spring Boot allows us to create two type of configurations. It can be a YAML configuration or it can be the application properties. So I'm choosing application properties here, and the version of Java I'm choosing 17 here. Okay, and then the dependency that will be required for us to create RESTful web applications would be one dependency, that is going to be the web dependency. So select web dependency. You can notice that here web dependency is used to build web, including the RESTful applications using Spring. MVC uses Apache Tomcat as the default embedded server. So this is what I have already spoken about, that Spring Boot starts the server automatically because it has the embedded Tomcat available with it. So we can simply generate this particular project, and a Spring Boot project will be ready for you. Then what you do is, wherever we have created that particular project, we can open that, and then we can simply extract it. So once you extract this particular project, now you go to your Eclipse after extracting that particular project and import the project into the workspace. So here is my workspace. I'm gonna import that particular project. I can just simply right click, or I can also go from files, import. And then when I'm importing this particular project, it's a Maven project. So I'll simply go ahead and say that it's a Maven project. I'll expand this, and then I'll say an existing Maven project has to be imported into my workspace. Then click on next, go to the uh, directory where you have downloaded that particular project. So it's available into my downloads. I'll go to the downloads, and here I have this REST API, our first Spring Boot project, and I'll import that. Just click on finish, so you get a Spring Boot project. Wait for this project to be built. So once this project setup is complete, you will have the complete structure of your Spring Boot project. Fine. So let it import everything, download the sources, and set up our project. So once it is set up, you will see your Spring Boot first Spring Boot project looks like this. What you can also do is you can go to Eclipse Marketplace and get the Spring STS ID, or Eclipse, just an Eclipse is also fine if you are downloading the Spring Boot project from Spring IO. If you have a ID, the STS ID, then you have the option there itself that you can create a Spring Boot project directly there. Fine. So any thing, in anyways, it is going to download the Spring Boot project from the start.spring.io itself. Fine. So now in this case, there will be two important things. One is the application properties. I told you that the kind of configurations I'll be passing here is going to be the application properties. It can be an application properties, or it can be a YAML file. Then I have a readily available main class with me. So you can see that this main class has a annotation Spring Boot application annotation on top of it, right? And it is running the same Spring application dot run. So these are few things that are automated, and in this case, just writing this Spring Boot application, you can see that here it is enable auto configuration, Spring Boot configuration, target, the component scan, and everything. So we have already spoken about something called as the component scan in our previous sessions. So here whenever we are writing the components or services or the repositories and everything, if they are part of this particular main package, then they can be scanned, because by default a component scan will be there on this particular package that we have created while creating the project. So I will be following the same thing, and I'll be creating all my controllers, repositories, services, the controllers and everything under the same package itself. Fine. So the very first thing here, to build a REST API, I would require a REST controller. So let us go ahead and create a very simple controller and see how things work there. So I'll just click on new class, and then I'm gonna create this under us different package and call it as the controller package. Okay, and let's call it as my controller, or something. Just by naming it as my controller, it will not become a controller class. Fine. So what I have to do is, very first thing is, I have to mark this as a REST controller. Okay, so to build a RESTful application, we require a @REST controller to be added on top of a class. And then we know that in a REST API, we have the get method, post method, put method, and the delete method. If you don't know about this, I have already explained these things in my Angular coding, so you can go back to that particular video and understand what exactly is a REST application, why do we need it, and what is get mapping, post, put, and delete mapping. Fine. So I will be creating the very first get method here for this REST API, and to create a get method, I have to use the annotation called as the get mapping, and then I have to add that annotation on top of a method. And then while writing the method, I'll just simply write a very simple method. I'll just call it as a method returning a string type of data. Let's call it as a get data or something, and I will return the string type of message here. I will call it as my first REST API get method. Okay, so I have created a get method. This is my first REST API. And also, if you remember, while dealing with the Angular HTTP services, what we have done is we have tested the REST API by using Postman, whether the REST API is working fine or not. So here also I can make use of the Postman to check our REST API, And notice that this application properties, I have not configured anything in here. So there are few things that are by default configured, that is the server port and everything. So let me just run this application and see what happens with my application. So I just click on run as Java application. So when I run this as Java application, it is running the Spring Boot. So you can see that details on the console. So a Spring Boot application is running up. You can also see the port on which it is running. So it is port 8080, the Tomcat port on which it is running. And lastly, you can see that the application has started. So to test this application, we do have this controller created here, right? So to test this application, we need a Postman. So let's go to Postman. We know the port now, that is 8080, and obviously the host is the local host. So I can simply go, and the get mapping is done, so there should be a get method here. So I'm taking this get method. I'll call this as http colon slash slash localhost colon 8080. That's my first REST API endpoint created for the get method. So you can notice that I'm getting the reply as my first REST API get method. So this shows us that we have successfully set up the REST Spring Boot project and also created a simple REST API there by and also we have created a get mapping there. Likewise, if you remember, we had a post method. See here, post, put, delete, all those things we have discussed. So we can have that as well. Like for example, let's go ahead and create a post mapping and see the things. So here in this case, once again, I'll come back to my method and I'll create a normal string method itself that will be created for a post mapping. If I go ahead and hit the same URL for the post now, it will give me an error saying that that particular endpoint is not configured. So you can see that the method is not allowed. So basically, when you are dealing with the Spring Boot, you might either REST API, you might either get a 404 error, that is page not found, or 405, that is method not allowed. So one thing that you have to keep in your mind is that if it is showing you that method is not allowed, that means your URL is correct, but the type of method that you are using is wrong. If it shows page not found at that time, so either the URL is wrong or the server has not started, or maybe you have written something wrong in it. Okay. So post method is not allowed as of now because I have not written any post mapping here. And let us write the post mapping and see after that whether the post method will be allowed or not. So post mapping, and let's give any method name here, maybe post data or something. So here I have the post data and this is my first REST API. Let's call it as the post method. Okay, let's save it. And yeah, just saving this will not be enough because it is still running with the previous code. So I just save it, and once again I'm gonna run it. You can see that it is still showing me 405, that is method not allowed. So for this, what I have to do is I have to terminate this application which is running before, and again I have to rerun this application which is REST API application, the main class I have to run. So when I run the main class, now that the changes will be reflected and I will be allowed to use a post method as well. So when I hit send, now you can see that my first REST API post method is also created. So this way this is how simple we can create a REST API by using a Spring Boot. A lot of things are configured, and if we wish to provide more configurations, like if our port is already occupied, like an 8080 port is already occupied, we can go to the application properties and change the port. Like for example, if I want to change the port now, I can go for server dot port and then equal to, I can give any port that is free in my system. So I'll just save it, and once again I have to stop this application from running, save everything, and then rerun the application. So let's run the REST API application. Now when I run this REST API application, you will notice that now it is not starting on the server port 8080. The port is different port which I have given, so which has to be the port 1111. You can see that here port 1111 is started. So now if I go to Postman and test it on port 8080, I'll not have that. So you can see that I'm unable to connect to that particular port because 8080 the service is not running. Now the service is running on 1111. So if I click on send, now the post method is executed. If I want a get method, two methods I have configured, the get and the post method, so both I can get now. So this way you can either change the ports or any configuration that you like. You can change it in the application properties. And if you want to build a REST API, most importantly what you have to do is you have to mark your class as a REST controller, and then you have to go with the mappings, that is the get mapping and the post mapping. So we have lot more things to talk about, like in terms of the get mapping, how do we take the request body from the customer, how do we respond to the customer using a response entity and all. So we will be definitely seeing those things in our future tutorials, but as for now I believe that setting up our first REST API is important. Creating our first Spring Boot project is important. So I think I have already covered that part in this particular session. The next session will be the continuation of this, and we will be talking about more advanced things into the next session. So I hope you're enjoying in the series. If you like in the series, do subscribe to the channel, share the content, share the channel link with your friends, so that I get more subscribers, which encourages me to create more such content. Thank you. See you in the next session.